Circleville, Ohio was a small town described over and over again as the sort of place no one locked their doors. You'd be forgiven for dismissing this cliched phrase, though seeing as how the Circleville Pumpkin Show is an annual event which still sits as one of its top attractions, it's likely that this description is a lot closer to the reality than one might think. The town itself lies 25 miles south of Columbus and has a population of 13,000. From the outside, there would be little cause to doubt that it wasn't anything other than a cosy little town as it first appeared. In the late 1970s, however, life was to be turned upside down for a considerable number of its residents, and instead of the safety of home, Circleville would represent the setting of a tangled web of hearsay and gossip, with residents suffering accusations of corruption and calculated murder. One of the locals, Mary Gillespie, a bus driver for a local town school, became acutely aware of such a reality when, in December of 1976, she received an anonymous letter written in tall, stretched block capitals that read, "Stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about knowing him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified and everything will be over soon." The ominous tone and threats in the letter were referring to an alleged affair between Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massey, the superintendent of a local school. As promised, the letter writer had indeed been contacting others too, many others. Throughout the next 2 weeks, residents right across Circleville received letters that claimed to know intimate private details about the recipients' lives. The letters were postmarked from Columbus, were anonymous, and contained no return address. In many cases, they threatened harm, either physical or through the destruction of careers and personal lives. Some contained graphic drawings, and worryingly for most, many of the letters were hitting the mark in their accusations. Someone in the town knew an awful lot about other people's business, and they weren't pleased at all. In total, thousands of people had been, or were in the firing line to be, contacted by the unknown writer. Life in Circleville had turned very sour indeed. After Mary received her letter, she and the superintendent, Gordon Massey, denied the accusations of the affair, and she attempted to keep both the letter and subject matter hidden from her husband, Ron Gillespie. Less than a week later, she received one more similar communication, but made little effort to appease the writer by meeting his demands that she come clean on the affair. 2 weeks after the first letter arrived, however, she received a further, third letter. This time the stakes for admitting her alleged infidelity had risen. This letter was written in the same handwriting as the first and read, "Gillespie, you've had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBs, posters, signs and billboards until the truth comes out." Not quite content with simply threatening to smear Mary's name across town, the writer then also wrote to her husband, Ron, outing the extramarital relationship, and told him to put an end to the affair or else his life would be in danger. The letter to Ron read, "We must inform you that your wife is having an affair with Mr. Massey. She has chased him until he caught her. Eliminate them both before they eliminate you. Remember, we know where you work and know your red and white truck. No one can help you. Think of your children and their future. Call the school board and report the truth after you finish your investigation. Notify the school board immediately. Again, your life is in danger." This was a sharp escalation from the veiled threats and psychological fear the mysterious and seemingly zealous writer had utilised until now. The writer had also switched to an even less traceable handwriting style, one of squared-off capital letters were thickly drawn and evenly spaced, a series of blocks on a page. At a loss of what to do next, Mary and Ron enlisted the help of their close family. Ron's sister Karen, her husband's son Paul Freshout, and Bill and Paul's sister. After knocking heads together, the group came up with a suspect. A few of the letters were signed with the letter W, and they surmised from this that the writer was in fact one Bill or William Massey, Gordon's own son. Certainly he had a motive to protect his mother and his family. After the meeting, Paul wrote a series of 3 or 4 letters to William asking him to stop writing the threatening letters, and whether or not it was a coincidence, the letters stopped for a period, though several weeks later they started coming again, just as abruptly as they had seemed to have stopped. In August of 1977, now 9 months on from the initial outbreak of mail, Ron was at home looking after his children when he received a mysterious phone call. In recent weeks, Ron had been receiving continued letters threatening his life and informing him that his pickup truck was being watched and his movement slowed. This harassment now seemed to extend to a phone call. Ron slammed down the phone receiver, grabbed his gun, a small .25 caliber pistol, and stormed out of the house. It appeared that Ron had decided on that evening to confront the letter writer. Perhaps it was the phone call that took it a step too far, or perhaps he recognised the voice on the other end of the call. None of these details will ever be known, as unfortunately Ron only made it to the end of his street, where he lost control of his truck and slammed it into a large tree, killing him in the process. The Pickaway County Sheriff, Dwight Radcliffe, headed an investigation into Ron's death, and whilst he first suspected foul play, he later changed his mind and ruled it as an accident for reasons unknown to anyone but those on the investigation. This fact might not seem overly outlandish until the coroner discovered during Ron's autopsy that his blood alcohol level was 0.16, almost 2 times the legal driving limit. His family were not impressed with this finding and vehemently stated that when he had left the house on that fateful evening, Ron was not drunk. As it happened, Ron was, according to his family and close friends, only an occasional drinker who rarely, if ever, drank himself into a state anywhere near to a level of outright drunkenness. One other curious finding during the investigation was that of the state of Ron's gun. Forensics on the weapon found that it had been fired, discharging a single bullet. No bullet holes were found inside the vehicle, however, and no bullet was ever recovered from the wreckage, which, also rather curiously, had been sent to a crushers and disposed of only days after the accident. With the death of Ron Gillespie, one might think that the letters would have ceased or slowed down. However, this was not to be the case. Over the coming years, Mary continued to receive the mysterious mailings, which eventually escalated to posters and signs spreading around town. Almost all focused entirely on her alleged affair, and several threatened not only her and Massey's job stability, but the life of Mary's children too. Referring to Mary's 12-year-old daughter, one spoke of how the writer would put a bullet in her head. Between 1977 and 1983, Mary received around 39 letters in total. Whilst Mary had been marked as a focal point for the writer, she was not the only recipient, and in the same period, letters to the residents of Circleville totaled into the thousands, enough to fill a storeroom in the Pickaway County Police Station. After 6 years of this focused harassment and the death of her husband, Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massey finally came clean about an affair that had been happening between the two, though they stated adamantly that the relationship had begun in 1979, only after the letters had made their accusations and only after Ron's death and Massey's own divorce. This apparently was still not enough to appease the writer, who carried on his tirade regardless, calling for the end of the relationship at once. In February of 1983, the letter writer's attacks on Mary Gillespie had intensified to a new level. They had now begun to place signs along the roadsides of Circleville. Whilst on her bus route and seeing a sign that accused her daughter of an illicit relationship with Gordon Massey, Mary had had enough. She pulled her bus over by the sign, stormed out of the bus and approached the sign to rip it down. As she was about to do so, however, she noticed something curious. A length of twine hung from a crudely made box that the poster was attached to. She removed the entire structure from the roadside and brought it back onto the bus. As she pried open the lid, splitting the glue that held it all together, she found inside 2 large blocks of styrofoam holding a pistol in place, the twine attached to the trigger. This crudely built booby trap was designed to fire at anyone who tore down the sign. At first, Mary could not believe what it was that she was looking at. She testified in court later that she thought the gun was perhaps a starter pistol rather than a live firearm. Curiously, however, rather than immediately report the incident to law enforcement, she took the device home. After several hours, she finally drove it to the station, and upon investigation and the recovery of a poorly filed serial number, the police found that it belonged to Paul Freshour, her recently deceased husband Ron's brother-in-law. On February the 25th, 1983, Sheriff Radcliffe invited Paul Freshour to accompany him to the station to answer some questions concerning the Circleville letters. He was asked to copy the handwriting as best he could and then add content from several letters dictated to him, and was asked to write the content down. Following this peculiar form of handwriting analysis, Paul Freshour took the sheriff to his home to show him where he normally kept his gun, in the garage. Naturally, his gun was missing, as it was currently in the care of the police. Freshour claimed it to have been stolen. However, Radcliffe decided otherwise and arrested him for the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie. On October the 24th, 1983, Freshour's trial begun amongst much media attention. Freshour pleaded not guilty and was denied the opportunity to take the stand as a witness in his defence by his own lawyer, as despite the accusation and trial being concerned only with the charge of attempted murder, 39 letters were used against him as evidence that had been addressed directly to Mary. If Paul took the stand, it was deemed that over 1,000 letters and postcards would become admissible to the court, involving hundreds of residents. Both Paul and his lawyer knew full well the hatred that the letters inspired in the town, and presumed that with the letters pinned onto the trial in such a way, any case Paul could possibly make for his innocence would be utterly in vain. In the run-up to the trial, there had already been several news reports in local newspapers insinuating that Freshour was guilty of writing the letters, and stories even circulated that stated he had admitted to having penned the letters, a fact which was simply not true. Throughout the trial, several key facts were presented that gave Paul Freshour a glimmer of hope. Under questioning concerning the writing of the letters, Sheriff Radcliffe admitted that they had asked Paul to copy the letters and told him exactly how they wanted him to write, which is a peculiar way to obtain a sample of handwriting indeed. I showed him block forms, he said, how or what we wanted him to write. Sheriff Radcliffe also confirmed that no items, materials or tools that were used in the construction of the booby trap attached to the sign were found at his house, nor in his garage. Neither did they find any ammunition for the gun that was found inside the booby trap. Further, there were witness reports of a man hanging around the roadside right next to the position of the booby trap just 20 minutes before Mary made her discovery. The man was said to be standing next to an orange Chevrolet El Camino, a car Freshour did not own, and the description of the man did not match his appearance. Curiously, it was later brought up that the original statements claimed the El Camino to be yellow. However, somewhere along the line, this was inexplicably changed to orange at the trial. Freshour also supplied an alibi for the entire day that the booby trap was found by Mary Gillespie. Despite these facts building a relatively strong defence, at the end of the very public proceedings, Paul Freshour was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced for 7 to 25 years in jail. With Paul now behind bars, Circleville could breathe easily, or so many thought. Any hope was quickly dashed as the letters seemed to continue, only it wasn't only residents of Circleville that began receiving mail from the mysterious writer. Whilst in jail, Paul himself received a letter postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, and written in the now overly familiar, squared off block capital letters.